Sex and gender dimensions and equality, diversity and inclusivity considerations are increasingly recognised as essential components of good science. Their importance is emphasised in the Horizon Europe programme by the requirement for some legal entities to have a gender equality plan as an eligibility criteria, by the default integration of gender dimensions into research and innovation content as an award criteria, and by consideration of gender balance in research teams as a ranking criteria for proposals that scored the same. It's not just Horizon though. National funding programmes increasingly take into account sex, gender, equality, diversity and inclusivity when deciding whether to fund a proposed project. So, why do sex and gender dimensions matter so much? At its core, research and innovation is an activity done by people to develop products, processes and ideas that solve problems for people. It follows that good research and innovation should consider people's needs and capabilities as well as the potential impacts of products and processes upon them. There are about 8 billion people on planet Earth, contributing to developing products and processes as well as buying and using them every day. But each of us is unique. In reality, we have to consider the needs and capabilities of, as well as the impacts upon, about 8 billion types of people when doing research and innovation. The solution to this challenge comes from the social sciences, which offer us tools to aggregate, categorise and group people. This provides a framework for making sense of the world, allowing us to identify similarities in groups of people and enabling understanding of the complex needs, capabilities and requirements of people through an understanding of the way different social grouping schemes intersect. Sex and gender are two critical groups that intersect other social grouping systems that enable us to narrow down the 8 billion people on Earth, giving us a chance to start to understand a group's common needs and requirements, ultimately enabling us to design and manufacture better processes and products for everyone. But sex and gender are not the same thing. Sex is a multidimensional biological construct based on the anatomy, physiology, genetics and hormones of a person or animal. Different sexes have different anatomical and physiological characteristics that may affect the way they interact with or are impacted by the physical world. Each sex also has typical secondary sex characteristics. For example, human females typically have wider hips than human males, whereas human males are typically larger, stronger and have more facial and body hair than human females. It's important to note that whilst generalisations about secondary sex characteristics hold true over whole populations, they can vary dramatically from individual to individual. Gender refers to the interrelated socially constructed characteristics of human, women and men. Gender identity is all about how an individual perceives and presents themselves. This may change throughout their life and may or may not correspond to society's cultural expectations based on their biological sex. Gender roles and norms are a society's cultural expectations and perceptions about how a person of a certain gender should behave, act or express themselves. Gender relations are interpersonal interactions and group dynamics that are shaped by individual and societal concepts of gender. These relations are embedded in interpersonal relationships, social structures and larger systems of power, including the workplace. Gender power describes structures and systems of inequity that are based upon gender and which reproduce, shape and constrain opportunities and experiences for individuals and groups. To demonstrate why sex and gender matter in science and technology, let's consider a 2003 study focusing on biomechanical computational simulation of whiplash injuries. The study builds from a simple fact. Female vehicle occupants incur twice the risk of whiplash injury as male occupants, but no simple explanation has been found for this difference. It goes on to consider different factors that may be contributing to this disparity between the sexes, including biomechanical differences between males and females and gender factors, such as the fact that women tend to drive smaller cars than men and are more likely to be passengers. Ultimately, the study finds that anatomic dissimilarity of the sexes is likely the principal reason for the higher occurrence of whiplash in females. The authors postulate that the lack of a full explanation for the disparity arises from the fact that although there are a number of finite element models of the male cervical spine, female models are rarely documented. They go on to build the male and female finite element models and show that females cannot be accurately modelled as scaled down males, underlining a need for separate male and female biomechanical models. This study shows how historical bias in research approaches has hindered full exploration of the biomechanics of whiplash injuries and the development of solutions to make cars safer for everyone. In a 2017 study about structured prediction models for extracting information from images, the authors identified problematic gender bias in web corpora used to train the machine learning models. The algorithm was trained to identify the gender of people in images. When photographs used in the study show a man in a domestic kitchen, the algorithm systematically misidentified the individual as a woman, because the training sets portray women in cooking contexts 33% more frequently than men. The model amplified this disparity from 33% to 68% during testing. In fact, this study of gender bias is in some ways flawed itself, because it makes the gender normative assumption that a person's anatomy and physiology, which is at best all that can be seen in an image, defines their gender, when really it can only be used to define their sex. Nevertheless, it demonstrates the unintended consequences of failing to debias datasets used in machine learning. The two case studies shown highlight the impact of sex and gender bias on product design. However, these are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the ways in which sex and gender can impact on research and innovation. The component features of sex and gender intersect and combine to create a complex web of risk and opportunity around research and innovation that impacts stakeholders differently based on whether they are male, female or intersex, and whether they consider themselves a woman, man or transgender. If we consider a typical product or process value chain from ideation to end of life, we can also think about sex and gender issues as having effects on upstream and downstream factors. Upstream factors relate to how sex and gender influences the way we design and make things. Downstream factors relate to how sex and gender influences the way we access, use and dispose of things. Encouraging greater sex and gender diversity in the workplace, one of our upstream factors, is about more than creating a just and equitable society. It generates better outcomes for everyone. McKinsey has been monitoring diversity in the workplace since 2014. Repeated analysis of company performance versus gender diversity on the management team shows that companies in the top quartile of gender diversity are more likely to outperform their peers financially. Diverse teams also perform better at innovation, which can be in part attributed to capturing different viewpoints to understand a problem and develop a solution. In summary, the sex and gender dimension cross-cuts all areas of research and innovation. The physiological, anatomical, genetic and hormonal differences between sexes can influence the applicability and utility of a product or process. Gender power inequities can influence the diversity, inclusivity and effectiveness of teams to achieve their goals. And finally, sex and gender differences can affect the acceptance of research and innovation solutions.